Welcome to the Album Draft Podcast. My name is Reed. Thank you for listening. If you are listening to this via YouTube, you probably noticed that this is in a playlist format, and there are videos for each song embedded between the segments. This is something new that I'm trying, and I hope it enhances your experience with this podcast. So please let me know if this is something that works out. I usually have a guest or two or three on, and we'll pick an artist or a topic, and we'll each create a 10-song album. Sometimes we'll actually do a fantasy-style draft and pick our songs that way. For this episode, I am flying solo, and as the title episode already gave away, we're talking about one of my favorite bands, the Elder Emos, as they refer to themselves, a band called Emery. So the 20th anniversary of their debut album, The Week's End, is this year, which really just makes me feel old. And it's the fact that a good chunk of my favorite albums are starting to hit the 20-year mark as well. That just doesn't sit right with me. So I went through the same thing with Story of the Year's Page Avenue last year, and I know there's a couple other albums that have hit that mark as well. But I originally intended this episode to be a 5-song mini episode like I've done for some previous ones, but had a really hard time settling on just 5. So you're all going to get a full 10-song album episode out of me. This is going to be my first time doing this by myself. I usually have a guest on with me to kind of bounce some songs ideas off of, so hopefully this goes well. If you're not familiar with Emery, they are a post-hardcore emo band originally from South Carolina, but they moved to Seattle to be in a better music scene. The band themselves, they're made up of Toby Morrell, who does vocals and bass guitar, Devin Shelton, who also does vocals and bass, Josh Head, who does vocals, keys, and synths, and also does a lot of the screaming. Matt Carter plays guitar. Dave Powell does drums, and then Chris Keene plays guitar, who's kind of I'd say one of their newer members within the last couple of years. This is from their Spotify bio. It says that they teeter on an axis of unpredictably heavy soundscapes, off-kilter grooves, searing melodies, and fits of harmony. They've released 9 albums, with the latest one coming out in 2022, so I'll touch on that a little bit later. One thing that I really admire about them is that they truly do things how they want to, and they've got this big, loyal, strong fan base behind them. I've been a part of their Discord channel for some time, so I've seen a lot of it there. Unfortunately, I'm not part of Emeryland, which is basically a fan club on steroids, but they use that as a way to fund their recordings while they treat those fans to a lot of cool and unique things. It's probably one of the better fan clubs that I've seen within the music scene. In the 2 previous episodes of this podcast, I, along with my guests, shout out to those guys, we did a draft of Tooth and Nail and Solid State bands, which Emery was a part of the label for a long time, and they still are. Their latest album, Rub Some Dirt on It, was released on Tooth and Nail. But I bring those episodes up because I was able to draft them as one of my bands, and I mentioned that they were my most played Tooth and Nail band I had via my Spotify stats. So that also led me to want to do this episode, just kind of coming out of that one. My approach for this one was pretty par for the course for me. So typically what I do is I work through an artist catalog. I'll throw a bunch of songs in a playlist and narrow down from there. I didn't really have to start making the hard decisions until I got down to about 15 songs. And then going back to my Spotify stats, I did compare my most played songs to the list that I've ended up picking. And half of those songs that I picked were in my top 10. So I was kind of surprised there wasn't more overlap there. I also held very loosely to the track order itself. Wasn't really concerned about how it flowed like I have been in the past. I was more focused on capturing songs that I loved while also trying to get something from each era of the band. Obviously, with picking only 10 songs from 20 years worth of music, you will have to make some sacrifices, but I am happy with how my list turned out. So with all that said, let's get to the music. Let's start with song number 1. So song number 1 is Walls, which is from The Week's End, and there's probably no better song to start off with than this one. This is the opening track from their first album, The Week's End. This is the song that got most people, including myself, hooked on this band when it was released. And as I mentioned in the Tooth and Nail episode, it's truly the best of both worlds in that it's not only a great album opener, but can also be used to close out their shows. I always love seeing the videos of Josh in the crowd at their shows doing the screams at the end of the song. I had a chance to see them just way back in the day, and he was doing the crowd walking during the song, and I actually got a really good picture of it that I haven't been able to find. But this one, it's not only up there as a top song in their catalog, but also just for the genre as well.